So now we're going to work in radians. It's always a little bit, it takes a little bit to get used to working in radians. We're used to working in degrees. But so now instead of adding rotations of 360 and adding negative rotations of 360, we're going to add rotations of 2 pi, because 2 pi is the same thing as 360 degrees. So if I'm looking for 2 positive and 1 negative of pi over 6 lies in the first quadrant. So pi over 6 is going to have its initial side on the positive x-axis, opens up on the terminating side, is in the first quadrant, and here it is at pi over 6. So if I want to find 2 positive, I can add pi over 6, or I mean 2 pi. So I'm going to take pi over 6, add 2 pi. I need to get common denominators, so that's going to be pi over 6 plus 12 pi over 6. 12 pi over 6 simplifies down to 2 pi, so I'm going to have 13 pi over 6. So I know 13 pi over 6 is the same terminating side as pi over 6. If I want another positive, I can take 13 pi over 6 and add 2 pi. If I do that, I need common denominators. So I'm going to add 12 pi over 6, which is going to give me 25 pi over 6. So there's another coterminal angle, both positive. If I want a negative, I'm going to add a negative 2 pi to pi over 6. So I start with pi over 6, and I'm going to add a negative 2 pi. Once again, I have to get common denominators, so I'm going to add a negative 12 pi over 6. This is going to give me a negative 11 pi over 6. So I have 2 positive and 1 negative coterminal angle. Let's work with negative 2 pi over 3. Now we're starting with a negative angle, so we need to go in the negative direction. This is negative pi, negative 2 pi over 3, 2 pi, negative 2 pi. I'm opening in the negative direction, so I'm starting on the initial side. I open up. Negative 2 pi over 3 is going to be in the third quadrant. So this is going to be negative 2 pi over 3. So we need to find all the coterminal angles. We need 2 positive and 1 negative. So let's start with our positive first. If we want a positive, we're going to add a rotation of 2 pi. So we have negative 2 pi over 3, add a rotation of 2 pi. We need common denominators. Since my denominator is 3 here, I need that to be common. So I'm going to get 6 pi over 3. 6 pi over 3 simplifies to 2 pi. So this is going to give me 4 pi over 3. That's a positive coterminal. I can add another rotation of 2 pi to that. So I have 4 pi over 3 plus 6 pi over 3 gives me 10 pi over 3. There's 2 positive coterminal. They have the same terminating side as negative 2 pi over 3. Now we need to find a negative coterminal angle. So if I'm finding a negative, I'm going to add a rotation of negative 2 pi. So negative 2 pi over 3 plus a negative 2 pi. Getting common denominators, I'm going to have negative 8 pi over 3. And once again, that's coterminal to negative 2 pi over 3. So we have a couple more examples with radians. Find the negative angle coterminal with 7 pi over 4. So I first like to look at where is 7 pi over 4. So we start at 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi. So 7 pi over 4 is going to lie in the fourth quadrant because we can think of this as 8 pi over 2. I'm sorry, 8 pi over 4. 2 pi is the same thing as 8 pi over 4. So 7 pi over 4 is smaller than that, so we're going to start with our initial side, open in the positive direction, and end in the fourth quadrant. So we're going to have 7 pi over 4. So I need to find and measure a negative coterminal angle. The negative angle is going to be this angle here going in the negative direction. So in order to get negative, we start with our angle, 7 pi over 4, and we add a negative rotation of 2 pi. So that's going to be 7 pi over 4 plus a negative 8 pi over 4, which is going to give me negative pi over 4. So negative pi over 4 is coterminal to 7 pi over 4. And our last example here. Find the measure of a positive angle coterminal with negative pi over 2. So negative pi over 2 is an axis angle. So if this is my initial side and I'm opening in negative direction, this is going to be my angle. I want the positive angle, so I want to think about if I go in the positive direction. If I want a positive, I need to add a positive rotation around the circle, or positive 2 pi. So I'm going to have negative pi over 2, add 2 pi. So I'm going to get common denominators. That's going to be 4 pi over 2, which gives me 3 pi over 2. So negative pi over 2 is coterminal to 3 pi over 2.